It's been a really long time since I've sampled from vinyl, so today I thought I'd throw some things on the table and share some tips with you guys that hopefully help your vinyl sampling experience. Now, I've got two pieces of gear here. I've got my PT-01 Scratch made by Newmark, and I've got my SP404 Mark II. I'm directly sampling into this device. That allows me to use MFX, and obviously I can make full beats if I wanted to as well. So I'm going to start off with a few things that don't actually need this equipment, and I think actually only one of these tips requires me to have this stuff on the table, so it might be a bit overkill for this video, but we'll get into it anyway. So my first tip is, before you buy vinyl, try and make sure you can give it a listen before you purchase it. Now, sampling from vinyl can get very expensive very quickly. Obviously, hunt around in bargain bins at your local vinyl stores. Have a look in charity or thrift stores. They usually have some cheap vinyl because a lot of people don't really want vinyl anymore. That's a way that you can save some money, but another way is to try and check if there are going to be samples on the record before you purchase it. Now, proper record shops will usually have some sort of facility where you can listen to vinyl, and in some cases you might even be able to go in and actually take some samples as well if you're feeling a little bit cheeky. So if you can, try and find a record store that you can do that. It's going to save you a lot of money and headaches as well with getting home, putting a vinyl on the turntable and finding there's nothing on it. That really is quite annoying. Now, I do tend to buy a lot of my vinyl blind, but a lot of the vinyl that I buy is very cheap. And usually speaking, you can get one or two samples out of a record just because there's always usually a slower song or a song that hasn't got any drums. So you can take a chance if you want to, but on the whole, I'd say try and give it a listen before if you can. It's going to save you money, it's going to save you the headache of not being able to find samples, and also it's going to save you some room at home as well. If you only live in a small house like I do, I don't have a lot of space for vinyl, so having vinyls lying around that don't have any samples on them is going to quickly take up space as well, so that's another reason why that's a good idea. Okay, my next tip, and this is basically something that involves a little bit of patience, and that is, if you can, listen to the whole vinyl record before you start sampling from it. Now, I know what you're thinking, that's going to be very time consuming, but if you can put the time aside to do that, I guarantee then that you're not going to miss any gems on that particular vinyl that you've purchased. So that's part of the whole experience of buying vinyl, I think, is subjecting yourself to new styles of music, new types of music, and listening to it and enjoying that style of music, and then we can rip up the rule book, take the chops that we need and make beats with it. I think that's a really cool process. But yeah, if you can listen to the whole record, you know then that you haven't missed any opportunities to make banging beats. I've heard of all sorts of stories of sampling from records. I think one in particular, I can't remember the artist who it was, but they managed to sample like 1 or 2 bars out of a 15-minute long record, and that was absolute gold, and they made a full beat out of it. So there's no way they would have been able to find that if they were just quickly skimming through with the needle. They sat down, they took the time to listen to the whole record, and then as they were listening to it, they heard that sample. And obviously don't be afraid to take notes as well. We've got the sleeves that come with the vinyls. We can put notes inside those. A lot of people actually put little post-its on the centre bit here, and you can actually mark where the sample is if you wanted to. Put a little arrow on so you know where the needle needs to go to. A lot of scratch artists will do that, and you could do the same thing for samples. You could put little labels on to make it easier to find them in future. So that's my thoughts for tip number 2. If you can, listen to the whole record, and then that way you know you've listened to absolutely everything that you can on the record and got the most out of it. Okay, the next thing kind of links into that, and that is, if you don't have the time to sit down and listen to a whole record, then there is a technique which I find is pretty successful and good at saving time. Now, I would like to demonstrate this, but I can't see the grooves in my record very well in this studio lighting, so I'm going to just leave that for now, and I'll just explain the technique instead. So obviously on a vinyl record you can see all the grooves of the tracks, so you can see where each track starts and finishes. And what you can do with your needle is just quickly try the start of the record, the end of the record, and then the middle of the record as well. So those sorts of areas in records are the sort of places where you're most likely to find samples, just because of the structure of music in general. Now, obviously, this is a massive generalization, and there's always going to be exceptions to every rule, but as a kind of general rule, that is the best quick way to skim through records and find potential samples. Intros usually have bits where the drums aren't present, so that's perfect for making beats. outros as well. Instruments tend to drop out towards the end of records, so you might find something isolated at the end. And then failing those two, it's worth trying the middle. There might be a middle 8 or a pause in the middle where the drums drop out or where something drops out and allows you to sample it. So try the start, try near the end, and try the middle, and if nothing's there, you can pretty safely move on to the next track, knowing that you've covered most of the bases there. So my final tip does actually involve using the SP here. Now, it doesn't have to be an SP device, that just happens to be one of my favourite bits of gear. Basically, you just need something that's either got an equaliser or an isolator built into it. So it could be another sampler, it could be something like a DJ mixer. They tend to have those effects built in, and they are incredibly useful when you are sampling records. So the reason why these are so useful is because you can isolate certain frequencies, you can remove certain frequencies and make samples much more usable. One really obvious example is dropping the bass out. So I'll do a quick demonstration with this here. We're going to put the isolator on and we're going to drop all the bass out, and we'll have a listen to what the record sounds like. Okay, so that gives us the space when we actually chop that to be able to add our own bass lines. Now, if I put the bass back on this record, it sounds drastically different. If happiness was water, I'd never run dry. So yeah, you can hear there that the isolator is really powerful in the way that it's able to remove a lot of the low end if we wanted to. We could take out the mids or the high end as well. We can leave ourselves room for our own low end when we're making the beat. Another way that you could use it is the actual opposite, and that's to embellish certain frequencies. So maybe you want a lot more low end so that when you make your beat, your sample sounds nice and thick and you don't have to add your own bass. So let's do that as well and see what that sounds like. So you could hear there that the low end was really starting to come through in the mix and add a much deeper sound to the sample. What you could do if you got really clever with it, and a lot of the old hip-hop heads used to do this, you could completely filter out all the high end so that you can extract the bass line from a song and then use that in your own beat. So that is another way that you could use either EQ or isolator to your advantage when you're sampling from records. So that's it for this one, guys. Before you leave, I just want to mention about my shop, spvids.com. All the links are in the description. You can get drums there, instant downloads, you can get accessories for the SP, and you can also get merchandise as well. It really helps me keep making these videos, so that would be really appreciated. I want to say a big shout out to all my members who support me monthly. There's links below if you want to become a member as well. But apart from that, guys, I will be back with more content very, very soon.